Episode 75, What Success as a Parent Really Looks Like, with Coach Tiffany Rhoton.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and certified through the Life Coach School. Together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with the coach? Here we go.
As parents, it's natural to want our children to choose certain things or make particular choices so that they can have a certain outcome. But all too often, we really want them to do that so that we can appear a certain way as a parent, and so that we can feel like we were successful in our parenting role. Releasing our children of certain expectations doesn't stop once they leave our home and reach the age of adulthood. Coach Tiffany Rhoton doesn't feel like expectations are bad, but they can be damaging to the parent-child relationship if we base our relationship and love on those expectations being met. We want our children to buy into their choices because it's their choice, not because they feel they have to be a certain way to make us feel better or gain our love and acceptance. Tiffany cannot stress enough the importance of basing your success as a parent on what you can control and then allowing your young adult children to make their own decisions. It is a hard thing to do, but so important for your child's development, your development as a parent, and ultimately for the relationship you have with them.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm glad you're here, and I'm joined by Coach Tiffany Rhoton. I just got to recently see Tiffany at a conference that we were attending, and I always love when I get to see people in person, but it's fun to be here too via Zoom recording today. Tiffany, will you introduce yourself for us? I know you've been on before, but people still need to know all about you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Heather. I always enjoy doing this with you, so appreciate it. So I'm Tiffany Rhoton. I am a young adult life coach, and I also help a lot of parents of young adults and kind of help them navigate those young adults. I graduated from the Life Coach School in 2019, and then I just recently did Jody Moore's advanced coach training where I got to coach all of her clients for months, and that has been completely awesome. Really enjoyed that. I am a mother and a wife, and I have 5 children, and 4 of those are young adults. And so that's part of the reason why I decided to coach young adults, because I just saw the struggles of all of my children, plus all their friends and whoever, just struggling to navigate this young adulthood and making decisions and trying to figure out life. And for me, I'm just like, man, I wish I'd have had these tools when I was 18 or 19 years old. It would have made a huge difference. So I love coaching this age group because they're really open-minded, and they, if they really take this work, they change their lives and really make some good decisions. So it's just awesome. I love what I do. Can you tell?
Yes. And I love it. And it's interesting that you said you work with young adults, but you also work with parents. And I really find that is, I think, having like that component of like a parent, and you probably don't necessarily work with the parents of the young adults that you're working with, but ideally, I think how awesome would that be if parents and the young adults were both working on the same thing? The relationship just totally is different when you have 2 people working on something versus
absolutely. Yeah. Because I think sometimes parents, they'll come to me and they're like, fix my young adult. I'm like, well,
yes.
Why, parent, do you feel like your child needs to be fixed? First of all, can I coach you on this first? And then let me coach your young adult too. But yeah, I think all of us could use coaching in these areas because none of us have parented young adults before. And we all just kind of are trying to navigate this. So I think it's always helpful, to have
it makes me kind of laugh because I want to say, why did no one tell me about this? I mean, everybody talks about the young people, the little people in your life and how, what an adjustment that's going to be, but nobody really talks about this part.
Right. I swear it's the big secret of motherhood. At least it was for me. I thought they just graduated from high school and they went on their little ways. no, that's not even kind of what it looks like. So,
Which I'm so glad, right? I'm so glad they're not just going on their little way and not ever
right.
returning or connecting with me again. But
Yes, love them.
I know it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a fascinating thing to talk about because as our kids do grow and we think they're going to go on their merry little way, it's usually us that has the hard time letting go and letting them go on their way. But I'm curious why you think so many parents try to control their children's lives, especially as they grow into adulthood, right? And they want to produce certain outcomes. What do you think that is?
We raise these children and at some points in their life, we do have a lot of the control, and we kind of can navigate and help them and steer them and whatever. But I do find a lot what happens is parents kind of are living through their children, or also are maybe using their children as a way to boost their own self-esteem. And I found that for myself, the more that I've parented and the older I've gotten, I'm like, wow, some of the things my children have done, really, I think, if I'm being honest, my motivations were very much, yeah, I want them to succeed, but I kind of want them to succeed so I can have permission to be a good mom. And and everybody can be like, wow, Tiffany must be a great mom because look at her children and look what they're doing. And I hear these phrases all the time from parents that I think we think are really pretty and are really helpful, but I think they're not. Things like, oh, I just want the best for them. As if we know really and truly what is best for them. I think we sometimes think we know better than they do, but we're not them. We're not in their heads. We don't know what's going on. Other things like, oh, I don't want them to regret anything, as if we don't regret things. And that's part of who we are, right? So, but we don't want them to struggle. I want them to be more successful than I am. I hear these kind of things. And it's like, why? Why do they need, what is the motivation behind all of this? I think we've got to learn to be confident in ourselves, regardless of what our children do, because I see the opposite of parents that then have children that go way the other way. And they also take all the credit for that. It was me. I did something wrong. We can't take necessarily always the credit for the good. We also can't take the bad as well.
Yeah, that's really a double-edged sword, right? Because if we do want the credit for the good, then exactly what you said, we do take on the credit for all the bad as well. And so it kind of erases all of it. But if you can sit with it and just let them be them, there is so much more joy to be found because you don't have the highs and the lows of them doing or not doing what you think they should or shouldn't be doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I love this quote I found. His name is Adam Grant. He's on Instagram, but he said, children's achievements are not status symbols for parents. And yet, do we not all, to some degree, I know I've done it and I see this a lot, especially in athletics or dance or things where, high achieving, you see these dads that are almost living through their sons. Like, I want him to go further in football than I did, or baseball, or girls that I didn't make the cheer team. So I want my daughter to, but we use their achievements as a status symbol to us. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest problem with that is that it just changes the way that we parent. It's very much coming from a place of control, and kind of our motivations are not necessarily, hey, I just want you to be happy. It's more, I want you to be happy, but can you do it the way I think you should do it as a parent?
And ultimately, it changes our relationship with that child.
Exactly.
Which is long lasting, like that has lifelong consequences to it, not consequences, but results. Like the relationship that we have with our teenagers and our young adults, it leaves a lasting impression. It leaves a lasting effect. It really sets the tone for a relationship the rest of their life.
Right. And I see this a lot with young adults. They'll come to me and, like one will say, well, I have to go to this particular university. And I'm like, you have to go there? Well, my parents said they'll only pay if I go to this university. I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. So these kids are feeling pushed to do what their parents want. And it does affect the relationship. There's a lot of angst towards the parents. And most young adults I have found really want to please their parents. They want to be accepted by their parents. And so oftentimes they will do whatever their parents want them to do, even though in their heart of hearts, I'm not sure that's always exactly the way they want to do it. But I see that angst. And, Heather, even in my home, I have a daughter who I have this expectation of this big, beautiful wedding. And I'm sure that's come for years and years and going to receptions. And of course, we've got Pinterest now and all these things, and as we were planning her wedding, there was some contention as we were doing this because I had my idea in my head. And I will admit there was some of it. I'm like, hey, I want to show how big and beautiful my family is. And we're all in matching suits and ties and dresses and the flowers and the cakes and whatever. And my daughter came to me and she's like, I don't want any of that, Mom. I want a simple nothing. And ironically, COVID hit 2 weeks before her wedding. So everything was canceled. And it was the simplest wedding you've ever seen. But do you see how me trying to kind of almost push? And there was some motivation of like, no, I kind of want to show my big, beautiful family here. It really caused some contention between me and my daughter, because I was pushing on her what my motivations and agendas were. And she's like, but Mom, this isn't the wedding I've dreamed of. I want something different.
Yeah.
So I really learned a lot. That was a big aha for me as a parent.
Yeah. It was becoming your wedding and not your daughter's wedding. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we do with our kids. We make we're trying to create their life as if it's our life.
Yes.
And we're not letting them create their own life. We're trying to make them create something that we want.
Exactly. And I think we all are guilty to some degree or another, because there's this fine line of expectations, and things that we have. But yeah, I just see a lot of our young adults trying to please moms and dads because this is what mom and dad want them to do. Mm-hmm. But I find down the road, sometimes I get these young adults that are down the road. They've actually done what mom and dad want them to do. They've gotten the degree and, whatever. And then I get them and they're like, I'm so unhappy. I'm 27 years old. I hate my career. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. And they're like, well, my dad wanted me to do this. So I studied this major and I hate it. And so we think we're helping our kids, but down the road, if we're pushing them and this is not what they actually want, down the road, that catches them. And then they find, wow, I've done everything my parents wanted me to do. And I'm not happy. This isn't what I wanted. Yeah, it's really fascinating.
But it's interesting because that takes some trust on a parent's part, right? It takes us being able to trust that our kids actually can figure out what's best for them. Our kids actually have the capability to make wise choices, to be intuitive, to seek guidance. And it's really hard for us to let go and allow that, but it really does. It's an important piece of us, for us to trust. You said something that grabbed my attention. You said we do have expectations. So I actually want to talk a little bit about expectations, because I think that does get a little bit muddied sometimes. People are like, well, am I just not supposed to have any expectations for my kids? And I think there's a difference between expectations for children who you have stewardship over, who are still living in your home, versus expectations for those who are no longer living under your roof or whatever. And maybe, I don't know, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that too, but can we talk about expectations?
Yeah, I think expectations aren't always bad, right? Like our Heavenly Father even has expectations of us. I think where it gets muddied is when we base our happiness on those expectations, and so, yeah, as their children, there are certain ways in which sometimes we motivate through expectations. Like, I expect you to make your bed. I expect you to go to school every day. Those are ways in which we're trying to help children along as they're learning to use their agency. But then there comes this point where we have to kind of let up a little bit, I guess I'm saying, on our expectations a little bit, in that, yeah, of course, we'd love them to serve a mission or marry great people or be a college graduate or whatever our expectations are. But if we base our relationship, if we base our love upon those expectations of whether or not those are met, most of the time we're going to be disappointed, because it doesn't always go the way that we think it will, right? They don't always do what we want them to do. And so if we think, well, yes, I do hope that, my son will serve a mission, for instance, but I also love him and I want this to be his choice so that he buys in, so that he's doing this for him and not for any other reason. And we've told all our kids that, hey, we would love you to serve a mission, but if you don't, it's okay too. Like, we love you either way. And really, truly, that's the definition of unconditional love. So yeah, is it okay to have expectations and to teach them why missions are great or why college is, can be important or whatever? Sure, we can teach those things as we're raising them. But we have to be really, really careful about this expectation that we're basing our happiness or we're basing our self-worth upon whether or not our children reach those expectations. That's the other thing I see is I'm not a good mom if my daughter doesn't get married in the temple. I'm not a good dad if my son doesn't, whatever it is. Of course, we're good parents. And we cannot base what our children do upon what kind of a parent we are.
Yeah, that's so good. And one of the things that I see occasionally is parents who have children who come home from missions. And I don't even like to say come early from missions because I, in my mind, think when they choose to come home is when their mission was complete. But parents see it as they came home early and it's such a struggle for them. And I think it probably is large in part to what you're saying. Like, they make it mean something about them, that somehow they did something wrong in their parenting, or they weren't a good enough, whatever, a good enough mom or a good enough dad in order to help their child stay on a mission for, the prescribed amount of time.
Right. See, that expectation is all of our kids are just going to do everything perfectly. And then when they don't, it must be my fault, and I've been there, Heather. I've been to these places where I'm like, oh, I'm a failure if my kids don't do certain things. But when I finally became aware, oh my goodness, these are my expectations and they're really, really unhealthy expectations. It's like, basically, I have expectations that all of my kids are going to do everything I want them to, and they're going to be perfect. And when things started happening to where my kids started not necessarily doing everything I wanted them to, I kind of went into crisis mode. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm this terrible mom. And you see how we make that mean everything about us. And I did, until I finally just decided, this is exhausting. This expectation of myself is so exhausting. And I can't really truly love my kids when I have this expectation. And so I finally, a couple of years ago, I redefined what a good mom even looks like. Because what is the definition of a good parent? Like, that could be so many different things for so many different people, right? And so I finally looked at this and I'm like, my definition of a good parent cannot have anything to do with my kids or the outcome at all. So here's my definition, Heather. I am a good mom because I show up and I keep trying, and that's it. That's the only expectation I have of myself, is that I just keep showing up and I just keep trying as a mom. And when I finally decided that, and I just let everything else go, it doesn't matter if my kids get married in the temple or not, or whether they go on missions or whether they graduate from college, that doesn't have anything to do with whether I'm a good mom or not. I show up, I keep trying, I keep loving, and that makes me a good mom. And when I finally realized that, then it's so interesting when I kind of let those expectations go. It's not that my kids aren't doing wonderful things. They are, but I don't have this pressure on me like, oh, my love is conditional based upon if they reach my expectations or not.
Yeah. And like, you're completely in control of that, right? You're not handing over the capability for you to feel like you're a good mom to all the humans around you. Like, you get to, that's 100% on you, whether or not you show up, whether or not you keep trying. Nobody else can affect that.
Right. And just by thinking that I show up and I keep trying, it makes me feel more confident
Mm-hmm.
And then I just show up. My actions are so different towards my kids because when we're in this place of control, we're wanting to control what they do and the outcome. It comes from this really graspy place, fearful place. And that shows up in our parenting everywhere. What? You're not going to college? What are you talking about? Like, honey, but when you
Mm-hmm.
kind of just, oh, tell me about that. Oh, okay. You don't want to go to college? Okay. Tell me what you're thinking. Whatever, but see how it's not graspy. It's just like, oh, okay, I respect you. I want to hear what you have to say. I don't worry if my kids say that. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. What's your plan? Tell me what your plan is.
And I just can't help but think of the relationship is so much different with your child then, because number one, you're able to see all the wins that are happening for them in their life. Because if you're only focused on the things they're not doing that you think they should be doing, you miss out on so much. You don't get to see the amazing humans that they are, because I guarantee, are all creating things in their own way and doing things that are amazing. And that affects your relationship. What a different relationship you have with them if you aren't always looking to readjust their course.
Right. Yeah. It's made all the difference in my relationships when I just kind of let go of the expectations of what I thought that they should do. Because like I said, my kids aren't doing exactly what I thought they would. Some haven't finished college and some have decided a different path. And yet they're doing great. Like they're driven, they're focused on those great qualities. And I would say when you see a great quality in a child, build on the quality, not on the outcome of they need to be, they need to go to Stanford in order to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Just build on the qualities that you see and support them in those qualities. And and when we're coming from a place of support and love, they feel that. And I think it builds their confidence in themselves and what they're doing.
Yeah. So in order for us to be able to do that and build their confidence, it sounds to me like, and I've learned this from personal experience, that we have to gain confidence in ourselves, because we can't have our kids creating that confidence for us. It never happens, right? Our kids can't do that. We think they can. We think that the choices that our kids are going to make us feel more confident or feel like we're a better parent. And that's just not possible. So how do we do that? How do we choose confidence for ourselves rather than putting it on our kids' shoulders to do for us?
I think that's a really, really important question to answer for each of us, that we've got to figure out a way to find confidence in ourselves. And like I said, part of this mantra I have as a mom, I show up and I keep trying. It gives me confidence that I can do that. I can't create perfect children, but I can be who I want to be, which is I want to be a loving mom. Mm-hmm. I want to be a supportive mom. That's, and that's one of the questions I think that's really important to ask yourself is, who do you want to be as a mom of these children? Not what do you want to have accomplished, which is, I think, what we often say, what makes us successful. No, who do I want to be in these relationships with these children? That was huge for me, because I'm like, I want to be that mom that loves her children no matter what. That's also a mantra I have. I am a mom who loves her children no matter what. And that builds my confidence, because I can be that. I can show up as that kind of a mom. I can just love my children where they're at and trust. I think a lot of it's trust in God. He's got it. He really does. I don't think, especially as our kids get older, that our job is to police them or to try and, I see a lot of manipulation, try and like parents that, well, we'll pay for your schooling if you'll go here. See, that's all manipulating our kids to do what we think they should. Mm-hmm. It's not helpful. I have the coolest quote from President Nelson I wanted to just share, because this is coming from him, but he said, to rule children by force is the technique of Satan, not of the Savior. No, we don't own our children. Our parental privilege is to love them, to lead them, and to let them go. Isn't that so awesome? if we're grasping, if we're controlling, if we're basing our worth on them, our children, we're going to show up as a parent in that way. And it's kind of Satan's plan to control everything.
Not kind of, really. It is Satan's plan, right?
It really is. And so, my gosh, sometimes I do show up.
I know.
as Satan, I guess, in these children's lives, right? But
sometimes I don't really like agency. I've decided. Sometimes I just don't like agency.
Yeah, but I love where he just says it's our privilege as a parent to love them, to lead them, and then to let them go, and just trusting. Just
that letting go piece that's hard for mama's heart. I mean, for me, it's not the letting go and letting them make their own decisions, because I think that's kind of fun to watch. It's just the physical, not having them around all the time and knowing that's been it's been much more challenging for me than I thought that it would be.
No, I totally agree. I think it is for all moms. And I actually believe we go through kind of stages of grief.
Oh,
as our children leave. Would you agree?
Totally agree. And I don't think, I've got 4 children. I have 2 at home still, but I feel like I'm like that grieving process it happened with the first, and then I thought it would be maybe a little bit better with the second. Mm. And I actually think I think it hit me a little even harder with the second one. So I don't know. I'm not anxious for the third, because I don't know if I'll be able to crawl out of that one, but
I hope that we'll just, as parents, will acknowledge that that's hard on a lot of parents. I know some parents that are like, sweet, they're leaving. Great.
Yeah. And wherever you are, that's great. But just, it's going to be different for all of us. And anyway, it's a hard one. Okay. So the first thing you said that we need to do is we need to define who we want to be as a parent. These are some of the things some pointers that you had for us in gaining confidence as parents, so that we can allow our children to live their lives. So we need to know what we want, who we want to be as a parent.
Right. Who we want to be as a parent. Now, that's the first one. The second one is kind of trying to figure out what your role is. And that role changes, as we know, over the years that we parent, right? When they're little, our role is different. We're trying to keep them alive, and then we're trying to teach them how to read, and there's certain things. But naturally, if we're really wanting to help our children learn to be agents unto themselves, then we naturally, that role will change to the point where by the time they're a young adult, I think we take kind of a back step as a parent. We allow them that freedom, and it doesn't mean that we don't care or that we don't love, but I think our role changes to, we are a supporter. We support, we encourage, we are there still for help and support. Sometimes my kids will still come in and ask for advice, but I don't always just run off now. I've had to learn this, Heather. This is hard, but I don't run off with my mouth and just start telling them all the ways in which I think and what I think they should do. I've gotten to where I ask more questions, and I take this role of, what can I do to help you? How can I support you? But not taking control. The reins I've now given them to rule their life. And so understanding what your role is, especially as our kids age and become young adults, that it very much changes. And even when they get married, I've got a couple married now, that role changes dramatically. I don't often tell them what I think anymore. I just say, oh, wow, tell me about that. Well, if you need any help, call me. Love to help you with anything you need.
And I'm sure that they appreciate that too, right? I mean, I look back to that phase in my life, and when we had well-meaning authority figures in our life, just anybody who was older, ask us questions or like offer advice, it almost made you feel insecure or inadequate, like, oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Are they judging me? And that wasn't probably their intention, but that's kind of how it comes across when you're at that age. You almost interpret everything as that.
Yes, I hear that so much. Like, why does everybody, I go to church, I'm away at college, I come home and immediately everybody's like, so what are your plans? Are you going on a mission? Are you getting married? When are you having your first baby? La, 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 la. They're like,
Yes.
why do people do that? And I'm like, you know what? People are not trying to be rude. We're trying to create commonness there. But through working with young adults on the church level for years and years, I have changed my tune. I never say, so are you going on a mission? I don't lead them into what I think they should be doing. Does that make sense? Like, are you going on a mission?
You can't be
I
too
think you
specific.
should?
Yeah,
Right.
you can't be too specific in the questions you're asking or something because
I always just ask them now. I'll see, young adults coming in and out, and I'm like, so what are you up to? What are your plans? Because if you go to a young adult and you're like, so are you going on a mission? And they're not, that creates shame for them. They're like, well, I feel like they have to explain themselves and why they decided to go to school first or, whatever. So if we just open-ended, so what are your plans? What are you up to these days? It allows them to talk about what they want to talk about with you instead of us kind of leading that conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which I think is probably one of the other things that we get to do in learning to be confident is we just get to support and love, right? Like we get to figure out who we are and what we want, what our role is as a parent. That was the first thing you said. We get to figure out our role.
Yeah.
And then we get to love.
Yeah. I think love is the key. And, the definition of unconditional love is love without conditions. And I think if I wish I'd have learned this younger, Heather, but the more we can show up with our children and love without those conditions, those expectations, those, I wish you would do it my way kind of feeling, and just come from a place of, I love you. I love you. I'll love you through the good. I'll love you through the bad. I'll love you through the ups. I'll love you through the downs. I am here. I'm your biggest cheerleader. And I will stick with you to the end. Now, doesn't that sound like a great mom? And doesn't that sound like the kind of mom a young adult would love to have? Just a cheerleader saying, I'm with you to the end, honey. Whatever you go through, whatever you decide, I'm here and I love you.
And think of the communication lines that opens. If they know that and they hear that from you, how more likely are they to come to you with a problem or in wanting help in making some decisions? Like if you're trying to constantly always steer them, it doesn't leave any room for them to feel like they can come to you and seek your guidance and help. But if you're just, I'm here, I love you, whatever, like it's just a different space.
Yeah. And, I've noticed the more I've started doing that, the more they will come to me and they'll actually say, hey, Mom, I've been thinking about this. I kind of want to know your opinion. And if they ask me my opinion, sure, I'll give it to them. But I just withhold that and allow them to work through, which is so healthy, to let them work and struggle. That's part of the growth. That's part of growing up, right? Letting them kind of struggle through decisions and not just jumping in and saying, well, I think you ought to marry so-and-so, or I think you ought to do this for a major. I don't know what's best for you, honey. You know what's best. What can I help you with? Again, I'm here to support you. What can I do? It creates such an openness in a relationship. And it feels so much better as a mom too. Like it feels so much better not to control, to just kind of give that whole idea, because I guarantee your kids probably won't do exactly what you want them to, but they'll still do great things. And maybe they won't, but they'll learn the lessons that they need to learn when they came here. And we need to allow them to learn those lessons, as hard as that is sometimes.
Yeah. So good. So true.
Yeah.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me today. I think it's one we all need to hear. We need to have more often. Yeah. And I would love for people to know where they can find more of you. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a website you can always find me at. My company is directyourlifecoaching.com. And you can find me there. Contact me if you ever want some help with your young adults, or if your young adults are struggling and need some help with decision making. Of course, they can always contact me. I always do a free call so they can just get to know me and decide if I'm, a good fit for them or not. But yeah,
I think we
no, I love
sometimes,
young adults for sure.
yeah, and we kind of get it into our head that they're not capable of like getting coaching and getting we think that they just won't be receptive to it. But I find that age, they're receptive and they want to progress and they want to grow. And so we need to give them more credit and more access, I think, even access to things like this in their lives, because
I agree. It does nothing but bless their lives. It really does. It helps them to figure out, and when they're making all these decisions, how they figure out their thinking, and how their thinking is so powerful as they're creating their own lives. And, for the most part, even young adults that have come to me kind of kicking and screaming have ended up really loving it. But most young adults are so receptive. They love it so much. And then they go and tell all their friends, you need to call Tiffany. You need to, talk through this.
Yes.
This is so great. They're so appreciative usually of the tools that I give them. So.
Love it. Well, we will link to all of Tiffany's contact information in our show notes. You guys can find that all there. And thanks again so much, Tiffany, for being here. This was fantastic.
You're so welcome. What a privilege. Thanks, Heather.
Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.